Hey, welcome back. In my last video, I received a question about how did I know that the left side crankshaft bearing seal needed replacing? And I think it's a bit of a complicated answer, so I thought I'd just do another video which would allow me to go into depth on the subject, much to the chagrin of many. Let's start. Here I am, you can see me, I've got the new seal and I'm putting it in. But let's start with the easy side, and that would be the right side crankshaft bearing seal. Because the right side is the clutch side, and it's a wet clutch, so it is bathed in 4-cycle oil. It's generally easy to determine when the right side is bad because after the bike warms up, it'll start, or as the bike's warming up, but generally after it's warmed up, it'll start, if the seal's bad, it'll start sucking oil into the engine and into the combustion chamber, and you'll be burning 4-cycle oil. And 4-cycle oil has a distinctive smell and a distinctive color. Basically, you'll see white smoke coming out the exhaust. I had a Honda Express one once. I think I still have the engine, as a matter of fact. And the clutch was actually on the other side of the engine. But anyhow, I knew that seal was bad because after about 5 or 8 minutes of riding, it would just start spewing smoke out the exhaust. As a matter of fact, if you kept riding, and I remember I was riding it around at dusk, and not only was it spewing smoke, but it started spewing sparks out the back of the exhaust. And in addition, before that oil starts burning, it'll basically coat the rear wheel and rim with 4-cycle oil as well. So I finally, actually it didn't take me long, it's like, man, I can't ride it around like this. This is going to cause all kinds of problems. And I never changed that particular seal on a Honda Express, which is kind of hard to get to. And I was finally like, man, I just got to break down and do this because I want to be able to ride and not worry about damaging the engine. And we had Carl and I had a Yamaha QT50 that did the same thing. It wouldn't shoot sparks, but it would smoke, and eventually the engine would just cut out and die. And I think what was it's been a while, but if I remember correctly, I think what happened was it was basically sucking 4-cycle oil into the combustion chamber, and then the piston would wipe that to the top of the cylinder, and through hydraulic pressure, it would actually open up the seam between the cylinder head and the cylinder and force oil out from behind the head gasket. And then, once it did that, it would suck in a bunch of air and just die. So that was another unique experience with these seals. So anyhow, the right side is easy to tell. And on this particular bike, or at least the wet clutch side, on the Honda Express, that would be the left side. And on the Chappy and the QT50, it's actually the right side. But anyhow, the clutch side seal is easy to tell because you've got obvious signs. Now, the left side seal is much more difficult to tell. And that's the problem with two-strokes, because symptoms of a bad left side seal are also shared by many other things that could be wrong with the bike. And when you have a bike that's new to you, like this bike is new to me, I haven't had it for that long, so I don't know any of the history, and I'm just kind of finding out the maintenance history of the bike as I go through it and visually inspect it or ride it or whatever. So this has got more problems with it. Like, for example, at first it was difficult to start. Well, that could be the left seal, or it could be, something wrong with the carburetor, or it could be related something to weak spark. So several different problems can cause the same symptom. So uh, you might suspect the left seal with a hard starting condition, but it could be 18 other things that are causing the hard starting condition, or everything's working together in combination to cause a really hard starting condition. Who knows? So I was thinking about it though, and this is probably more trouble than it's worth. It's easier just to replace this seal out of preventative maintenance, and proceed under the assumption that on a 44-year-old bike, it's probably pretty rare that anybody opened it up and changed the seal. So just assume that you're dealing with the original seals. But one way you could tell is the same method you use to check for air leaks. Take some carburetor cleaner spray and spray it at all the seams of the engine. So, that's checking for air leaks at those particular spots, like, between the cylinder head and the cylinder, or between the cylinder and the case, or the cylinder and the exhaust, or the intake and the carburetor. You could do the same thing if, now, what makes it hard on this side is you've got a flywheel and a stator to get behind, but it may be possible, depending on how tight that stator fits onto the case, to drill a hole in the stator cover, which isn't on now, such that you could insert a straw from one of those carburetor cleaner spray cans behind the stator and flywheel and shoot in a little carb cleaner to determine if it gets sucked into the engine and causes the engine to rev at idle. So that's basically what you're doing with the carburetor cleaner. If there's an air leak and you shoot carburetor cleaner into one of those seams, the engine, while running, will rev. So, but that's a lot of trouble to go through. And I don't know if carburetor cleaner would damage the coils on the stator or cause you any other problems. I mean, the other thing you do is just take off that faceplate on the cover and just shoot it straight through there through the flywheel. Yeah, I don't know. Basically, the only way you're really going to know is take it apart, pull the seal out. If it is really hard compared to a new seal, it's gone bad. But in general and overall, it's just a good maintenance practice to replace this side, because it's so hard to tell from the bike just running or problems with the bike if it's the seal or 18 different other things causing whatever particular symptom you're having. Hard to start. This happened to be on the QT50 when I put a bigger top end on it and a performance exhaust. If you do anything that makes the engine rev at much higher RPMs, a bad left seal is going to make jetting a nightmare. You've got a temperature gauge on it. The temperature's running really hot, so you richen up the jet, but it gets too rich, and you back it down, and you go back and forth. You're basically chasing your tail. You can never find the right jetting, because I think what happens is the higher the RPMs, the more air it'll suck in to the engine, and the more air, the hotter it'll run, and you'll never get the jetting right. And on my QT50, before I changed the seal, I'd get up to full throttle and it'd start just flying, and then all of a sudden it would just cut out because the seal was so bad. I think it was kind of doing the same thing as what I was talking about before. You get to such a high RPM that it would suck in so much air the engine would just quit. It wasn't soft seizing, but there'd just be too much air, and the air fuel mixture ratio would be thrown off so much that it would just die. And so on a stock engine, unless the seal is really bad, you won't really notice it in terms of running. So like a minor leak, the RPMs will never get high enough to, where that becomes like a real problem that is immediately noticeable with a higher revving engine. Once you get into some serious RPMs, 10, 11,000 and beyond, if you get there, depending on the bike, then air leak in that seal will become obvious. And so I just recommend it as basic maintenance to do on a bike that's new to you. It's not that hard. You just got to get, the flywheel puller is really the only specialized, and maybe a piston stop are the only specialized tools that you need. And just do it out of an abundance of precaution. So there you go. There's my 11.5 minutes on the left side crankshaft bearing seals. Let's look forward to a ride video, man. Enough of this wrenching.